So this is the part 2. Make sure you have watched part 1 so you can understand. Also don't forget to subscribe to us. The night was thick with silence, broken only by the rhythmic sound of our footsteps on the dirt road. The village that had once been my home now felt like a distant memory, swallowed up by the darkness around us. Ifeoma and I walked without speaking, each of us lost in our thoughts, but the sense of urgency was palpable. We couldn't afford to stop or be caught. Every second felt like it could be our last chance for freedom. The weight of the decision pressed down on me like a heavy cloak. I was leaving behind everything, my family, my village, the life I had known. But in return, I was gaining something invaluable, the possibility of a future that was truly mine to shape. The thought of never having to wear the chains of expectation again made my heart race with both fear and exhilaration. What would I find beyond the village? What kind of life awaited me in the unknown? I didn't have the answers to those questions, but I had a newfound sense of determination. I wasn't just running from something, I was running towards something. A life where I could make my own decisions, where my worth wasn't defined by my family's wealth or the expectations of others. A life where I could be free. The path we walked was familiar to me, yet tonight it seemed different, darker, more menacing. The trees loomed overhead, their twisted branches reaching out like silent sentinels. Every so often, a distant howl from the forest reminded me that we were not alone, that the night held dangers of its own. But I wasn't afraid. I couldn't afford to be. Ifeoma's presence beside me was a constant source of strength. She had always been my rock, the one person who understood me better than anyone else. She had never judged me for my dreams or my desire to break free from the expectations placed upon me. And now, she was risking everything to help me escape. In her, I saw the embodiment of loyalty and friendship, and it gave me the courage to keep moving forward. After what felt like hours, we finally reached the edge of the village. The path before us stretched out into the unknown, leading to the small town where Ifeoma's relative lived. The house was far from our village, deep in the countryside, and it would be our sanctuary for now. But as we made our way toward the next phase of our journey, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us. My heart skipped a beat, and I instinctively slowed my pace, my eyes scanning the dark horizon. "Do you hear that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Ifeoma stopped and listened carefully. The wind rustled the leaves, but nothing else seemed out of the ordinary. "What is it?" she asked, her voice tense. "I don't know," I replied, a sense of dread creeping over me. "It feels like we're being followed." Ifeoma glanced around, her instincts sharp as always. "We need to keep moving. Stay alert." We quickened our pace, but the feeling of being watched only intensified. It wasn't just the sounds of the night anymore, it was the weight of invisible eyes, the unmistakable presence of someone, or something, lurking in the shadows. My breath came faster as the adrenaline kicked in. We couldn't afford to be caught, not now, not when we were so close to safety. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness ahead. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure was tall, cloaked in shadow, and its face was obscured by a hood. I couldn't see who it was, but something about the way they stood, unmoving, silent, made my blood run cold. Ifeoma stepped in front of me, her protective instincts kicking in. "Who are you?" she called out, her voice steady but firm. The figure didn't respond at first. Then, slowly, they took a step forward. As they moved into the dim light, I gasped in recognition. It was my father. The realization hit me like a thunderclap. My father had found us. My heart sank as I looked at him, standing there, his face hard as stone. I had hoped that by leaving, I could escape his expectations, but now, standing before me in the middle of the night, he was a reminder that some things, some people, were impossible to outrun. "I've been looking for you," he said, his voice low and cold, a mixture of anger and disappointment. "You can't just run away, Lami. You're mine to protect, to guide. This is for the good of the family." You don't understand what's at stake. I felt a wave of anger rise within me, but it was quickly replaced by sadness. You're not protecting me, I said, my voice trembling but strong. You're controlling me. You're making choices for me, choices I never asked for. This is my life, not yours. My father's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. You think you can just run off and live a free life? Do you think the world is kind to people like you? You'll be nothing without us. Nothing. His words stung, but they only made my resolve stronger. I'd rather be nothing than live a life where I'm forced to give up everything that matters to me, I said, my voice unwavering. I'm not your puppet, Father. I'm my own person. Ifeoma stepped forward, her presence a shield beside me. She's right. She's not a possession. You don't own her. The silence that followed was thick, heavy with unspoken tension. My father looked at us both, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought he might strike us down or call for help, but instead, he did something I didn't expect. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the night as quietly as he had come. I stood there, breathless, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. He hadn't tried to stop me, not in the way I had feared. But I knew this wasn't over. He would never truly let me go. He would always find a way to pull me back, to remind me of the obligations I had to the family. And yet, something within me had shifted. I wasn't the same person I had been before. I was stronger, braver, and I had a sense of purpose that could not be shaken. I turned to Ifeoma, my eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, I whispered, my voice breaking with emotion. I couldn't have done this without you. She smiled, her eyes filled with understanding. We're in this together. Always. And with that, we continued on our journey, the road ahead uncertain, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I was truly walking towards something that was mine. A future that was mine to create. The days that followed our encounter with my father were filled with uncertainty, but also with an undeniable sense of liberation. Ifeoma and I traveled through the night, taking the long and winding paths that would lead us out of the familiar and into the unknown. The countryside was vast, the land stretching out like a canvas, waiting to be painted with the future we were determined to create. As we walked, the air around us felt different, lighter, almost as though the weight of the world had been lifted from my shoulders. But the further we traveled, the more I began to realize something. The price of freedom was not just the risk of being caught. It was also the loneliness, the isolation, the feeling of being untethered from everything I had ever known. The quiet of the countryside seemed to mock me. The distant calls of birds, the rustle of leaves in the wind, everything felt foreign. My village, my family, the life I had grown up with, all of it now felt like a dream fading away. The comfort of familiarity had been replaced with the raw reality of a life that was still uncertain, still fragile. Yet, despite the loneliness that threatened to engulf me, I knew one thing: I was free. I was free from the expectations of my father, free from the chains that had bound me to a future that was never mine to begin with. And in that freedom, I could feel the stirrings of something new, a hope that had been dormant for so long, now awakened and ready to grow. But freedom came with its own set of challenges. As we approached the small town where Ifeoma's relative lived, I felt a pang of fear creep up my spine. The town was a place I had never been before, and though it offered the promise of safety, it also felt like an unknown land, one where every corner held the potential for danger. We didn't know what to expect, who we would meet, or how long we could stay. The thought of being caught by my father or the villagers made my heart race, but there was no turning back now. When we finally reached the town, it was late in the evening. The streets were quiet, the homes dark and still. It felt like a ghost town, but if it was to be our refuge, then I would accept it. We walked through the narrow streets, making our way to a modest home tucked away at the edge of town. Ifeoma knocked softly on the door, and after a few moments, it opened. The woman who greeted us was older than Ifeoma and me, but her face was warm, her eyes filled with kindness. Her name was Aunt Nkechi, and she welcomed us into her home with open arms. It was a small, humble house, with simple furnishings and the scent of cooking wafting from the kitchen. Despite the modesty of her home, there was a warmth here that I hadn't felt in so long. "Welcome, my daughters," Aunt Nkechi said, her voice soft but firm. "You are safe here. No one will find you." Her words were a balm to my soul. For the first time since leaving my village, I felt like I could breathe again. The fear that had gripped my chest began to loosen, and I allowed myself to relax, just for a moment. Ifioma and I spent the night in Aunt Nkechi's home, and though sleep didn't come easily, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. I knew that the journey ahead would still be difficult, that the road to freedom was far from over, but for the first time, I allowed myself to hope. The next morning, Aunt Nkechi prepared a meal for us, simple but hearty, with fresh vegetables and grains. As we sat around her small table, I felt a surge of gratitude toward her. She didn't ask questions. She didn't demand explanations. She simply offered her shelter and her kindness, a gift I had never expected but desperately needed. As we ate, Aunt Nkechi spoke. "I know you are running from something," she said, her voice gentle but knowing. "But you must be careful. The world is not kind to those who choose to walk alone. Your father, your family, they will come looking for you. You must stay hidden, at least for now." I nodded, my throat tight. I had no answers for her. What was I supposed to say? That I had fled the village because my parents had sold me to a billionaire dog? That I couldn't live a life dictated by money and tradition? It all sounded too absurd, too painful to put into words. "I will stay hidden," I said finally, my voice steady. "I will stay hidden until I know what to do next." Aunt Nkechi smiled at me, her eyes filled with compassion. "That is wise. But remember, my dear, you cannot run forever. At some point, you will need to face the world again, to make peace with the past so that you can truly move forward." Her words lingered in my mind long after our meal was finished. She was right. No matter how far I ran, I couldn't escape the past forever. At some point, I would have to confront the choices I had made, the family I had left behind, and the future that awaited me. But not yet. Not now. For now, I was safe. For now, I could rest. The days that followed were quiet. The peacefulness of Aunt Nkechi's home was a stark contrast to the chaos and confusion that had gripped my life just days before. I spent my time helping Aunt Nkechi around the house, doing chores, and learning about the rhythms of her quiet life. It was a life I had never imagined for myself, a life of simplicity, peace, and contentment. But despite the comfort I felt in her home, the unease lingered. Every night, I would lie awake in the small room Aunt Nkechi had given me, my mind racing with thoughts of my family, my father, and the life I had left behind. I kept asking myself the same questions over and over. Was what I did right? Was running away the only choice I had? Would I ever be able to repair the bond with my family that had been broken by my decision to leave? Aunt Nkechi, ever perceptive, could see the unrest in me. She never pried, but every now and then, she would sit beside me, her presence comforting, as if offering me silent reassurance that I wasn't alone. She understood what it was like to carry the weight of difficult choices, to wrestle with the tension between family loyalty and the need to live a life of integrity. "Remember, my dear," Aunt Nkechi said one evening as we sat on her small porch, the sun setting behind us, casting a warm glow over the fields. "Running away is not the same as escaping. You may leave your home, but the past will always follow you. You must face it when you are ready. The world will not wait for you to heal." Her words struck me deeply. I had thought I could outrun my past. I had believed that if I simply distanced myself from the people and the life that had tried to define me, I could create a new, untainted future. But Aunt Nkechi was right. I couldn't outrun my memories, my family, or the choices I had made. The weight of those thoughts pressed heavily on me, and one afternoon, I decided it was time. I needed to face the truth. I needed to know if I had made the right decision in running away, and if I could ever find peace with the people I had left behind. I went to Ifioma with my decision. I need to go back, I said, my voice trembling. I need to talk to my parents. I need to face them. Ifioma looked at me with concern, but also with understanding. She knew how much courage it took for me to even consider returning. Are you sure? She asked gently. It's dangerous. Your father might not forgive you. The village will never understand. You could lose everything. I know, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. But I can't keep running. I can't live like this anymore. I need to make peace with myself, with them, and with my choices. If I don't face them now, I'll carry this pain with me forever. Ifioma nodded, her expression softening. Then I will go with you. I will be there for you, no matter what happens. But remember, whatever you decide, you have my support. And so, together, we made plans to return to the village. The decision wasn't easy. My heart was heavy with fear and uncertainty. I didn't know what I would find when I got there. Would my parents be waiting with open arms, or would they cast me out forever? Would I ever find a way to reconcile the world I had left with the person I had become? The journey back was long and arduous. As we approached the familiar paths of my village, memories flooded back, of laughter shared with friends, of the warmth of family dinners, and of the love that had once bound us together. But now, those memories felt distant, clouded by the pain of what had happened. The village, once my safe haven, now felt like a place of judgment and expectation, a place where I no longer belonged. When we finally arrived, the village was eerily quiet. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the dusty streets. As Ifioma and I walked through the village, I felt the eyes of the villagers on us, their gazes heavy with curiosity, judgment, and unspoken questions. I could hear the whispers behind me, and my heart clenched. The world I had left behind had not forgotten me. It had only been waiting. I made my way to my family's house, Ifioma by my side. My hands were trembling, and my heart raced as if I were walking into the unknown. When we reached the door, I stopped, taking a deep breath. This was it. There was no turning back. I knocked softly, my palms slick with sweat. For a long moment, there was no answer. But then, the door creaked open, and there stood my mother. Her eyes widened when she saw me, her expression a mixture of shock, relief, and something else, something I couldn't quite place. "Lami," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You've come back." I couldn't speak. My throat was tight, and all I could do was nod. My mother stepped forward, her hands trembling as she reached for me. The years of silence, of unspoken words, seemed to fall away as she pulled me into an embrace. "I thought I had lost you," she said softly, tears in her eyes. For a moment, I stood frozen in her arms, unsure of what to say. The world around us seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next words to come. Finally, I spoke, my voice quiet but steady. "I'm sorry," I said. "I ran away because I was afraid. Afraid of being trapped in a life that wasn't mine, afraid of losing myself. I didn't know how to face the truth. But now, I'm here. I want to make things right." My mother pulled back, her eyes searching my face as if trying to understand the woman I had become. "I never wanted to lose you," she said. "We wanted what was best for you, Lami. But I see now that we didn't understand. We didn't understand you." Tears welled in my eyes as I looked at my mother, the woman who had given me life, the woman whose expectations had once shaped my every move. But now, for the first time, I felt like I was truly seeing her, seeing the vulnerability behind the decisions she had made, the love that had been clouded by fear of the unknown. "I don't want to be part of a life that is controlled by money and power," I said, my voice stronger now. "I want to live my own life, make my own choices. But I don't want to lose you, Mama. I want to rebuild what we had." My mother's eyes softened, and for the first time in a long while, I saw hope in them. "We can rebuild, my child. We can rebuild, if you'll allow me the chance." The silence that hung between my mother and me felt heavier than anything I had ever experienced. For years, I had built walls around my heart, walls that kept me safe from the pain of being forced into a life I did not choose. Now, standing in the home I had once known, those walls began to crack. The cracks weren't just physical, they were emotional, as if everything I had fought to suppress was bubbling to the surface. As I stood there, unsure of what to say next, my mother gently took my hands in hers, her touch warm and familiar. The years of separation, of misunderstandings, seemed to dissolve in that moment. "We've been through so much, Lami," she said softly, her voice carrying both sorrow and hope. "I never wanted you to feel like you didn't have a voice in your own life. But I was scared. I wanted you to have the life I never could, one filled with security, comfort, and a future where you never had to struggle the way I did." Her words cut through the layers of anger and confusion I had carried with me. For the first time, I saw my mother not just as the woman who imposed her expectations on me, but as a woman who had lived with her own fears and struggles. She had made her choices based on what she thought was best for me, but in doing so, she had failed to see the woman I was becoming. "I never asked you to carry my burdens," I said quietly, my voice thick with emotion. "I never wanted to live a life that wasn't mine. But I know now that I wasn't the only one who was afraid. You were, too. I didn't understand that before." Tears welled up in my mother's eyes as she pulled me closer. "I'm so sorry, my child. I didn't know how to give you the freedom you needed. I was afraid of what might happen to you in a world that doesn't care about people like us. But I see now that love is not control, and security is not found in the things we can buy. It's found in the choices we make and the people we choose to become." Her words struck a deep chord in me. The weight I had carried for so long, the guilt, the anger, the sadness, began to feel lighter. I had been running from this moment, terrified of facing the truth, but now, I understood. We were both products of our fears, and our fears had kept us apart. "I want to move forward, Mama," I said, my voice trembling. "I want to rebuild our relationship, to find a way to make peace with the past. But I need you to understand, my life, my future, belongs to me. I need to live it on my own terms." She nodded, her face softening with understanding. "I understand, Lami. I've seen the strength in you. I've seen the woman you've become, and I want to support you in that. I've made mistakes, but I will try to be better, for you, and for myself." In that moment, something inside me shifted. I no longer felt the weight of the past bearing down on me. I no longer felt the need to prove myself or justify my decisions. I had come back to find peace, and I had found it, not in the apology I expected, but in the understanding and willingness to change that my mother was offering. I looked at Ifeoma, who had been standing silently by my side, offering me her unwavering support. Her eyes were filled with quiet pride, knowing the courage it had taken for me to come back and face everything I had been running from. "You're not alone in this, Lami," Ifeoma said softly. "You've taken the hardest step, and now you have the strength to rebuild what you've lost." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle into my heart. With Ifeoma by my side, and with my mother's willingness to understand and change, I knew that I could face whatever came next. The journey ahead would not be easy, nothing worth having ever was, but it would be mine. As the days passed, my life in the village began to take on a new rhythm. I stayed in my family's home, though it felt different now. My mother and I spent more time together, working side by side in the kitchen, talking in the evenings as we shared stories and laughed. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments of tension, but there was a newfound respect between us, an understanding that neither of us had expected, but both had longed for. But despite the peace that was beginning to settle in, there were moments when I felt the shadow of my father's anger creeping back into my life. He had never been one to openly express his emotions, but the bitterness that had simmered beneath the surface for so long was beginning to surface once again. One evening, as I sat with my mother in the living room, the door opened, and in walked my father. He looked at me with the same cold, distant gaze that had filled me with fear for so long. For a moment, neither of us spoke. It was as though time had stood still, and the years of silence between us had stretched into eternity. Finally, my father broke the silence. "So, you've come back," he said, his voice sharp. "Do you think it's that easy, Lami? Do you think you can just walk away from everything you were born into, and everything I've done for you?" His words were harsh, but I didn't flinch. I had faced him before, and I had made my decision. I didn't walk away from you, Father. I walked away from the life you chose for me, the life that wasn't mine. I'm not the person you thought I was, and I'm not going to pretend anymore. His eyes darkened, but I stood my ground. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to back down or justify my actions. I had made peace with myself, and I no longer needed his approval. The chains he had wrapped around me for so long were finally broken. "I don't know if you'll ever understand," I continued, my voice steady. "But I'm here now. I've come back because I want to rebuild our relationship, but I'm not going to do it on your terms. I need to live my life the way I see fit." My father said nothing for a long time, and I could feel the tension in the room building. But then, something unexpected happened. He sighed, a long, weary sound, and his posture softened. "I don't know if I can forgive you for leaving," he said, his voice quiet now. "But I know I can't keep holding on to this anger forever. I've lived my life with fear, fear of losing you, fear of losing control. Maybe it's time to let go of that fear." It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. For the first time in years, I saw a flicker of something in my father's eyes, something that resembled the man I had once known. It was an opening, a chance for both of us to heal, to rebuild the trust that had been broken. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Father," I said, my heart full. "But I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere. Not until we figure this out together." As the days turned into weeks, my life in the village began to shift in ways I hadn't expected. The healing that had started with my return wasn't immediate, and it certainly wasn't easy. But there was a quiet strength that had settled within me, one that allowed me to face the world I had once tried to escape with a sense of resolve and clarity. I spent more time with my mother, and we began to rebuild the bond that had been severed. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. We talked more than we ever had, and I started to understand her better. Not just as my mother, but as a woman who had struggled with her own fears, desires, and dreams. She had always wanted the best for me, even if her vision of the best had been rooted in control and protection. And while I didn't agree with everything she had done, I realized that her love had always been there, buried beneath the decisions she had made for both of us. With my father, things were more complicated. He had not fully embraced the changes in me, but there was an unspoken understanding between us. He had never been one for words, but he had slowly started to show his affection in small, subtle ways, by helping me with the chores, by offering advice when I asked for it, and even by letting me share my thoughts without dismissing them. The anger he had held onto for so long had begun to loosen, but there was still much to be healed. Yet despite the gradual shift in our relationship, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. My parents had begun to accept the changes in me, but there was still a deep, unspoken rift between us, a gap that had existed for far too long. I realized that for me to truly move forward, I needed to find a way to reconnect not only with my parents but also with the person I had once been before everything had become so complicated. One morning, after a particularly difficult conversation with my father, I decided to take a walk through the village. I needed to clear my head and find some peace in my thoughts. The familiar sights of the village, children playing, women chatting, the old market bustling with activity, reminded me of the life I had left behind. But now, they seemed different, as though I were seeing them through a new lens. As I walked, I came across an old friend, one I hadn't seen in years. It was Chijioke, a childhood friend who had always been a source of joy in my life. We had spent hours playing together as children, dreaming of futures that had never seemed constrained by the world around us. When I saw him, his face lit up with recognition. "Lami," he called out, his voice full of warmth. "It's really you." I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my eyes for the first time in weeks. "Chijioke," I said, walking toward him. "It's been so long." He looked at me closely, his eyes filled with curiosity. "I heard about what happened. You're leaving, your return, things have been strange around here since you left. But I'm glad to see you're doing okay." "I'm trying," I said, my voice soft. "It's been a lot to process." Chijioke nodded, his expression understanding. "I know. But you're here now, and that's what matters. Whatever happened in the past, it doesn't define who you are now. You're stronger than you know." His words brought a surge of emotion. It was strange, this was the first time I had truly spoken with someone who had known me before all the turmoil, someone who didn't see me through the lens of my family's expectations or the village's judgments. Chijioke saw me as I was, and that felt like a gift. We sat together on a bench near the market, catching up on the years that had passed. We spoke about our childhood memories, about the things we had hoped for when we were younger, and about the paths our lives had taken since. Chijioke had stayed in the village, working as a teacher and helping to shape the minds of the next generation. He spoke with passion about his work and the ways he tried to inspire his students to think for themselves, to break free from the constraints of tradition and live lives that were authentic to their true selves. As we talked, I realized something. The person I had once been, the child full of hope, curiosity, and dreams, had not disappeared. She was still inside me, waiting to be rediscovered. The fears, the pain, and the anger I had carried with me for so long had clouded my vision, but now, with Chijioke's reminder, I saw clearly. I wasn't just the daughter of my parents or the girl who had been married off to a billionaire dog. I was me. I was Lami, with dreams and hopes of my own. "I'm starting to understand now," I said, looking at Chijioke. "I've spent so much time trying to live up to other people's expectations, trying to make everyone happy, that I forgot who I was. But I'm starting to remember. I can't live for anyone else anymore. I have to live for myself." Chijioke smiled, his eyes full of encouragement. "You've always known that, Lami. You just had to find your way back to it." I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was on the right path. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be more obstacles to overcome, but I was no longer afraid of what lay ahead. I had found my strength, and now I was ready to embrace the future, whatever it might hold. The days after my conversation with Chijioke felt like a turning point. I could feel the shift within myself, the quiet resolve to take control of my life, to stop living in the shadows of my past and step into the light of my own future. It was as though the fog that had clouded my mind for so long had lifted, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe freely again. But though I had found a sense of inner peace, the world around me wasn't so easily changed. The village, though familiar, had grown distant in my eyes. My father's lingering anger, my mother's hope that I would return to the life she had envisioned for me. It all weighed heavily on me. They were trying, I could see that, but I knew the real work lay ahead. Rebuilding my relationship with my family was just the first step in my journey toward the life I had always dreamed of. I spent the next few weeks continuing to work with my mother on the farm, but there was a growing sense of discomfort in my heart. I had spent so much time focusing on my past, trying to make amends and regain my footing, that I had neglected the one thing that truly mattered now, my future. The weight of familial expectations still loomed over me like a heavy cloud, but I knew that if I was to truly heal, I had to embrace the next chapter in my life. One evening, as I sat by the fire with my mother, she turned to me with a soft expression. "Lami," she began, her voice cautious, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About living your life for yourself. I can see now that I've held on to you for too long. I've tried to shape your future, but that was wrong of me. You have to live for you, not for us. I looked at her, my heart swelling with emotion. Her words were everything I needed to hear, and in that moment, I felt the last of the old barriers between us begin to crumble. I don't want to lose you, Mama, I said, my voice thick with emotion. But I can't keep living the way I was. I can't pretend that I'm someone I'm not, just to make everyone happy. My mother nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I understand, my child. You're not the same little girl who left here, and I'm not the same woman who tried to control you. We've both grown. I just want you to be happy, Lami. That's all I ever wanted. We sat there for a long while, the fire crackling in the silence between us. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace in my heart. The healing had begun, and it was not just between my mother and me, it was within myself as well. The following day, as I went into town to buy supplies for the farm, I found myself standing at the edge of the village, looking out at the fields beyond. The world seemed so vast and open, filled with possibilities. I felt the pull of something greater, something beyond the village, beyond the life I had known. For the first time, I realized that there was a whole world out there, waiting for me to take it in my hands and make it my own. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't stay here forever. As much as I loved my mother, as much as I appreciated the healing that had taken place between us, I had my own path to follow. The world was calling me, and I could no longer ignore the deep yearning in my heart to experience it, to build a life for myself that wasn't dictated by anyone else's expectations. That evening, I sat down with my parents to talk. My heart raced as I prepared to tell them what I had been thinking. Mama, Papa, I began, my voice steady but filled with emotion, I've been thinking a lot lately, and I've made a decision. I love you both, and I want to continue being a part of this family. But I can't stay here forever. I need to go out into the world, to live my life on my own terms. My father, who had been quiet until now, looked up at me with a mixture of concern and understanding. What are you saying, Lami? He asked, his voice hoarse. I'm saying that I need to go to the city, I replied, my voice unwavering. I need to find my own way, to experience life on my own, without the weight of your expectations holding me back. I know this isn't what you want, but it's what I need to do. I have to live my life for me. There was a long silence, and I could feel the tension building between us. My father's eyes were hard, his face unreadable. But then, to my surprise, he nodded slowly, as if he understood. You've always been a stubborn one, he said, his voice softening. But I can see that this is what you need. If this is the path you've chosen, then I will support you. But know this, Lami, you'll always have a home here, no matter where life takes you. My heart swelled with gratitude. I hadn't expected my father to understand so quickly, but his words meant more to me than I could express. This was the first time in my life that I truly felt free. I will come visit, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I promise. But I need to do this. I need to find my place in the world. My mother reached over and took my hand, her eyes filled with tears. I'm proud of you, Lami. I always have been. And I want you to find your happiness. I've held you back for so long, but now, I see you. And I will support you, no matter where you go. With that, my parents and I shared a quiet moment of understanding. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was real. We had all come to terms with the fact that our lives were not defined by our past mistakes or expectations. We could choose our own futures, and that was a gift. Part 3 incoming. Please don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications bell so when we drop part 3 you will be notified.